What's up everyone, it's Ojh&x. We're back at it again inside of RAID Shadow Legends, and in today's video we're going to talk about affinities. If you do not understand the affinities and what that means, then you're making this game probably unnecessarily difficult for yourself in areas where it is already reasonably difficult. We need to be using the affinities to our advantage, so this video is going to give you an understanding of what they mean. Shout out to RAID Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. But let's get straight into the meat of it. Now, wherever you go inside of the game, before you start a battle, you're going to be presented with a screen that looks like this. And in the center of it is going to be this triangular, circular looking logo in the middle. And this is really important that we understand what that means. Firstly, there are 4 affinities in the game. There is the blue affinity or magic. There is green, which is spirit. There is red, which is force. And then finally, there is purple, which is void. Now, understanding the relationship between all of these is really, really important. So as we can see here is that each affinity has a good matchup and a bad matchup, apart from void, that I'll come to in a moment. So if you are blue or magic, then as the arrow suggests, is that magic is stronger in this particular battle than spirit. Spirit having an advantage over force, and force having an advantage over magic. Now, conversely, what you can say is that magic is then weak against force, force being weak against spirit, and spirit being weak against magic. As you can see by the triangle is that void sits in the middle and is not connected to any of the corners, and that's because void is just neutral to all of the other matchups. There are no benefits, there are no downsides, is that is on a level playing field with void champions, so void champions can often be seen as some of the strongest in the game. Now, if you are looking at starting a brand new RAID Shadow Legends account, then I do have a link which will get you off to one of the best possible starts. It will give you the legendary Elanaril. Once you hit level 15, you will unlock the epic support champion Uugo. With the promo code Desert Queen, you will unlock Ojh&x, who is another legendary for you, and at the minute there is the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles collaboration event going on. Log in for 7 days and you will unlock Michelangelo, so your account within 7 days will have 3 legendaries, 1 epic, and will just get you off to an incredible start. QR code on the screen, link in the description and the pinned comment below. Come and join me, let's get involved. Okay, so how does it work in battle? We've discussed that there's an affinity advantage and an affinity disadvantage, but what does that actually mean? So let's look at the advantage list first. So if the attacker has an affinity advantage, so as we said before, that will be magic being stronger than spirit or spirit being stronger than force, that there is a 30% chance of a skill landing as a strong hit. And I'll come back to strong hit or hit types in a moment. The second thing that we're going to get is an extra 15% chance of a skill landing as a critical hit. Now, often we can try and build out our champions to have a 100% crit rating. But if our attacker, or if in that interaction we have an affinity advantage and we only have an 85% crit rating, then we're getting the extra 15% chance here, which will take us up to a 100% crit rating, which is just amazing. And then, like I say, that will land as a critical hit. So to start with then, the strong hit, let's look down at the bottom here. A strong hit is a hit that deals 30% extra damage. So if you've got the affinity advantage, not only do you get a 30% chance of landing a strong hit, but the strong hit would deal 30% extra damage. So that's massive. So we need to be utilising that as much as possible. Also, with affinity advantage, is that there is the additional 15% chance of landing as a critical hit. Now, critical hits are based on our crit damage stat. So we deal extra damage based on the percentage of that crit damage stat. So in the example below, if you had an attack that did 100 damage and you had a crit damage stat of 200%, it would actually deal 300 damage. So this is just huge. We need to be utilising the affinity advantage as much as we can. Conversely, if we look at the affinity disadvantage, and what you will see is that the list for the affinity disadvantage is slightly longer, and that's why it's even more important that we make sure that we are picking champions with the right affinity for that particular battle. Now, in the early stages of the game is that you might not have that many options and you're just going to have to kind of deal with this for now. But it's worth understanding so that when you get later in the game, you can use this, you can use this a full effect to your advantage. So if the attacker has an affinity disadvantage, damage flat out reduced by 20%. So that there's no probability, there's no kind of like, well, there is a probability, it's 100% probability. There's no kind of different stats or chance that goes with that. Damage is flat reduced by 20% if you've got an affinity disadvantage. There is a 35% chance of it landing as a weak hit. Now earlier we only got a 30% chance of having a strong hit, now we're getting a 35% chance of it being a weak hit. Let's look at a weak hit. So a weak hit decreases the damage by 30%, including any bonuses, and it does not activate certain effects. So debuffs that would be applied with that particular skill, if they land as a weak hit, it also means that the debuff will not be applied. So that is huge. That is absolutely huge. So we've got an increased percentage of having a weak hit, which is going to give us a 30% reduction in damage dealt, and we don't get the debuff that goes on as well. And that debuff, those debuffs can have a massive effect. Decreased defense debuffs, everything like that. That is massive in this game. So another reason why we need to try where we can to avoid affinity disadvantages. But we're not done there, because there is a chance of the skill landing as a critical hit is reduced by a further 15%. So in the example earlier, when I said if you were an 85% crit rating, just as standard, and if you had the affinity advantage, that would bump you up to 100. Well, now if you're 85% and you've got the affinity disadvantage, you've actually only got a 70% crit rating. So understanding all of this is really, really important to make sure that you can progress through the game, making it as easy as you can for yourself. As a summary then of what we've just discussed here is that there is a really useful table which sums this up for us. So with the affinity advantage then, as I said, plus 15% crit rate, plus 30% chance of a strong hit, and a strong hit giving us plus 30% damage. Super, absolutely super. Neutral affinity. So neutral affinity, as I said, will be the void affinity, which is neutral with everything. Or if you're going to be blue on blue, or green on green, or red on red, that obviously there's none of the advantages there. So there's a 0% chance of a strong hit, 0% chance of a weak hit, no penalties, no advantages, no nothing. It's just, it is what it is at face value. And as I said before, with the affinity disadvantages, is that this is actually where it like really starts to matter. As you can see, is that there are way more disadvantages than advantages. Minus 20% damage flat rate, minus 15% crit rate, a plus 35% chance of a weak hit occurring, and that weak hit being 30% less damage dealt, and that you've obviously not got the buffs that go on there either, which can be absolutely huge. So just loaded into a random campaign stage here. Don't worry about the absolute, but about the mixture of levels that we've got going on here. But when you're doing your attacks, unless you're using the auto attack, in which case that the AI will just kind of do its attacks anyway, and I think it will kind of try and pick, the best option for you. But if you're doing this manually, then you'll see that there are arrows above the heads of the opposition here. So yellow arrows being that it is affinity neutral, and red meaning that we have got a disadvantage. Let me just pick any old attack here. Let's just attack over there. As you can see, that one landed as a weak hit. Conversely though, when we come down to our next champion down here, you can see that 3 of the arrows have turned to double green, and obviously double green being that we've got an affinity advantage. So these are the champions that we would like to be attacking in that example. Just a little way in game, in case you are, in case you don't remember what the triangle looks like, that there are pointers in game to help you out. The final thing I want to say around affinities is the importance of understanding them for leveling up your champions. As you can see, I've got a yeoman here who is of the magic affinity. Now if I use a magic brew to level him up, then we get 18,750 XP. Lovely. However, if I use one of the different brews, so if I take one of the spirit brews, we only get 12,500 XP. So it's really important that when you are leveling your affinities that you use the corresponding brew to that affinity to get the maximum amount of value. And that's everything I've got for you around affinities. For more content around RAID Shadow Legends, if you're not already, please get yourself subscribed if this was useful. Give this video a like, get down in the comments. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.